This video will go over a little bit more in depth how to set up your recipe book cover. Um, you should have make sure that you watch the actual assignment video because that'll kind of explain the assignment a little bit, sort of what the expectations are. But I'm going to show you how I would begin to work on the actual cover itself. So make sure you read through the project details. This is going to be sort of a combination of Photoshop and InDesign. So all of your imagery should be created in Photoshop, and that means the kind of the background. So where you place the images, you can have smaller like inset photos that you place in InDesign, and I will go over that when I show you this. But the main idea is that you'll set up your Photoshop file to be the same size as your InDesign file. And you can do either the spread or you can set them up as separate, front cover, back cover. But the biggest thing I want you to notice is that you need at least 3 images, and this is on the back cover and front cover, at least 3 layers. You have to use a blending mode and a layer mask. And then just make sure when you set up your Photoshop file that you also set up the bleed that you had in your InDesign file. So what I'm going to do first is actually set up my InDesign file because this is going to give me sort of the guide for what my Photoshop file should be. So I set up my InDesign file. I'm going to go to document setup. I actually did this previously. I set it up as 8.5 by 11. You can do 8 by 10. You can do 9 by 12. You could do 9 by 11. I'm going to leave that up to you. You want 6 pages. Remember to start at page 2 with facing pages so you have those 2 pages next to each other. I always set up 6 because I like to keep all my designs in one file. That way it's easier to keep. I can kind of look back and compare. I can easily drag elements from one to the other. And then you want to go ahead and set your bleed to 0.125. So I'm just going to hit OK again. I added 4 columns just because I think it's nice to have the columns to kind of help me place my images, text, all that kind of stuff. You don't have to do 4 columns. You could do 3 columns. You could do 6 columns. And then we'll go over this a little bit more too when you get into setting up your actual pages. So I'm going to go to Photoshop, and I actually found a couple images that are Thanksgiving related. You can use the images from the recipes, which I actually don't know if I put them in here, but I will put them in this project 3. But I have these photos, and then I also grabbed these fall leaves. And so remember what you have to do with these photos is right now it's at RGB and it's a JPEG. We want this to be CMYK because it's going to be printed. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to mode, CMYK for the color mode, and just hit OK to that box. And then I'm going to go to my image size, and I'm just going to make sure it's 300 dpi at a decent size. Right now this file is huge. So I'm going to make sure resample is checked, and I'm just going to make this 14 inches just because I don't need it to be as big as it was. And then we have that image. I'm going to go ahead and do a save as and save this as a PSD file. So now it's a PSD. Go ahead and replace that. And then these fall images, this is where your layer mask and your blending modes are going to come into play. So this is a fall leaf image. I'm going to go ahead and unlock my background, and I'm going to do the leaves as a layer mask because I want the background to be transparent. So all I'm going to do is take my, not my eyedropper, the magic wand tool, and I'm just going to click the white. I usually do, and you probably learned this in raster, and I'm sure Professor Geraldo showed you different ways to do this, but I usually do my tolerance probably with a white background. I'll just leave it at 30. But now once I have the white selected, what happens is if I go ahead and hit this layer mask icon, it's going to mask out the leaves, and I don't want that. I want the background to be masked out. So I'm going to go to select inverse. And now I'm going to go down here and hit my layer mask. And so now you see you have a layer mask. The background is transparent. I'm going to go ahead and do a save as and save this as autumn leaves. And I'm going to make sure this is also a Photoshop file. Save. And I didn't check to see the size yet or the color mode. So another thing I'm going to have to do is, it actually doesn't really have a color mode. I'm going to go ahead and make it CMYK. I'm going to hit OK here. And then I'm just going to go to image size and make sure that this is okay. So my resolution is 72. I want this to be 300. For some reason it didn't change. Okay, so I resampled it, and then it should be this size. So now what I'm going to do is go to, let's say 14 inches, because I really didn't need to be that big either. Hit OK. There's my leaves. I think I saved them as a PSD. I'm just going to hit save. And now I have my leaves. So I'm just going to start with those two things for now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Photoshop and make a new file. So Photoshop new. I'm just going to do the cover and the back cover separately, and you guys can do this too. So I want print, I want inches, and my page is 8.5 by 11, but remember I added a bleed, and so 1/8 of an inch bleed on each side is going to add 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to make that 8.75, oops, 0.75 by 11.25. And then 300, CMYK color mode. Background, it doesn't matter. You can do white, you can do transparent. That's kind of up to you. And I'm going to hit create. Oh, cancel. Create. So here is my basic cover. If you wanted to, you could pull in those guides to kind of give you the where your actual print area is. That's going to be completely up to you. I don't really think it matters that much. But I'm going to go ahead and just put one at the top and the side. I guess I could put them all in. And you can see I'm making sure this is 0.25. This is touchy, so I'm not going to get too particular. All right, I'm just going to do that. And now I'm going to place my image. So I'm going to go to File, Place. And you can do embedded or linked. It's up to you. I usually would do embedded, or what you can do is I can open recent. I can open that autumn leaves file, and then I'm just going to select all, copy, and I'm going to paste it into this. And then that way it pastes on a layer, and I can use my move tool to kind of move things around a little bit. Deselect that little guy. And then now I'm going to open my turkey image. So I'm going to go to Open Recent. And again, with Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator, there's a million different ways to do relatively the same thing. But I want this all to be in different layers so that I can count this as, 3 layers. So I'm selecting it. I'm copying it. And then I'm going to place it into my file. So I'm going to move this down. Interesting. Oh, okay, I did something wrong. So this is good. This is good that I did this wrong. So I want my leaves to be with a layer mask again, right? So to do that, and you know what? I didn't also select these little white areas in here, which is kind of wrong too. So if I want to get these little white areas in here, as long as I'm selecting this mask, I can zoom in and select these white areas with my Magic Wand tool. So I'm going to hold Shift and just select, and then I'm actually going to go to select similar. It'll select all those weird white spaces, and then I'm going to hit this layer mask button again. Oops. Inverse layer mask. I don't want to do that. All right. Well, you want to make sure you get all the whites in there. I think I actually can just delete. So yeah, I'm just going to click in here, delete. Sorry about the confusion. And I can actually just click on this again and go to select similar and then just hit delete. And what that's doing is that's taking that all out of that mask. If I just want to select the leaves themselves, you want to control click and then hit select pixels. And that's just going to select those leaves. So I'm going to copy and I'm going to delete this layer. And I'm going to paste it onto this layer. And that's going to be my leaves. You can tell that these have been clipped out. Your layer mask isn't obvious on here. So if you wanted to do it in a different way so your layer mask is obvious on here, you could. But I'm just going to assume that you used a layer mask because it's a transparent background. This is not going to look great because I'm not taking any time whatsoever to really make this a visually interesting cookbook. But So just, bear with me. So there's my image. So now I have 2 images in there, and this is just the cover. So, I'm just going to make this big. What I was going to do, oh, the other thing that Photoshop does now that's really weird is you don't have to hit Shift to have it scale proportionally. I don't know why they have done it that way, but there's my fall leaves, there's my turkey. And then this is, again, just my cover. So then what I want to do is I want to leave space for the name. So remember, you have to have a title, a subtitle, and then a byline. I'm going to probably put my byline down here by these leaves. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a rectangle that just goes like here. So there's my rectangle. It automatically filled with this blue color, and I can change that. So let's pick a more Thanksgiving-ish color. So now I'm going to draw this again. I should have picked the color first. And it didn't fill it with that color for some reason. All right, delete. We're going to go back to this. I'm going to click twice on it, and then I'm going to use my color. Okay, there we go. So that's going to be where my the name of my book is. And again, I'm not putting any thought into this whatsoever, but I kind of like that some of those leaves are overlapping that. And then where my blending mode comes into play, these are your blending modes right here. So if you kind of scroll through these blending modes, you can kind of see what it's doing. It's kind of giving these funky kind of effects. I probably, a lot of these are a little bit weird, but maybe I do, let's see, maybe I just do this darken thing, not multiply, I want darken. All right, and that's not that dark. You want to make sure that text will flow over that, so I'm just going to say, no, I don't want to do that. So I'm going to have to think of another way to do a blending mode, and maybe I do the blending mode with the leaves. So we could do, let's see what happens if we do kind of a funky, and again, I want you guys to take a little bit more care when you're doing this because I'm just kind of winging it, just to kind of give you an example of what we're looking for. All right, I'm going to do this terrible vivid light. So I'm going to make the ugliest recipe book cover in the world. So there is that. So I'm going to kind of just leave it here. I might move this up a little bit because I really don't like the position of this. Let's see. Let's just move it here. You guys probably don't want to have your turkey completely covered up by this. I'm going to hit shift and make this a little bit bigger. There we go. We'll just do that. I could, if I wanted to, maybe let's do opacity. No, that's too much. Maybe we'll do opacity, and that'll show some of that turkey underneath. Okay, so I did opacity, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a save as. And I'm going to save this as recipe book cover 1 PSD. And obviously you should save this in a good place. So now that I did that, I can close. I'm just going to window shade. Now I have my, and the reason I did 6 pages is because we've got, 3 different cover options that you can do here. So now when I go back to my design, I can just put I can do file place, because you always want a file place and that makes it linked. I'm going to go to my Design Plus applications, find my recipe cover, and then I just want all layers. And hit OK, and if I click here, this should be perfectly sized to my page. It's a little bit longer because I did the bleed on the this side as well. So I'm just going to move this over here and just tuck this in a little bit. And so there's my cover. And now in InDesign, I can add text. Thanksgiving recipes. Make that a little bit bigger. Maybe center it. Obviously, I'm not going to spend too much time with this. But then you can, put this over here. I could put a key line. I could, typeface is terrible. Sorry, I have to, I can't leave it. Let's see. How about April Fat Face? There we go. Thanksgiving recipes. I'll make this white. I'm going to change my leading because remember, the bigger your type gets, you kind of want to adjust that leading. So now I'm going to kind of make this a little bit smaller. All right, Thanksgiving recipes, it's white. And then maybe I add a stroke here to kind of separate those two bits, make the stroke white. This is the ugliest Thanksgiving recipe book cover ever. And then down here, oops, I can say, oops, a collection of recipes to celebrate the Thanksgiving holiday. And then we'll make this say Helvetica. Let's make it just light. Center that, make it white. Obviously, I'm going to want to make that bigger. So in InDesign, if you remember to resize something, so what I like to do is instead of going through and making the type size bigger or whatever, if you hit Command Shift and then drag, that will size it proportionately. You can't just use Shift, you have to do Command Shift. And another thing to remember about InDesign, this image right here, remember that I can move that image around, but if I click twice or if I hit this little lifesaver guy, that will move the image around within that box, not the box itself. So just kind of remember that that's kind of how that works, kind of funky. The other thing that I like to do is I hate when these little boxes are around everything. So if you hit Control Command H, it will get rid of those boxes. And then if you hit W, you can kind of see what your recipe book looks like. It looks terrible, but, and then the back will be, you know, if you look at the instructions, the back will have a short statement about the recipes, a list of the recipes, the author's headshot, which is yours, or you can just find a person, a short bio. You should use you because it is your project. You know, you can make the bio up, it doesn't have to be long. A barcode, which you can get online, and then a little copyright at the bottom of the page. Again, these examples are a little bit different than your project. This was from a different project that I did a while ago. So they didn't have all of those requirements, but I just want you to get used to adding a photo, like building your background photo in Photoshop and then bringing that into InDesign and placing things on top of that. So your bio photo can be placed in InDesign. If you had, say this person built all of this in Photoshop, but then they decided they wanted to have a few inset photos of the recipes, that can be in InDesign. But I definitely want part of your covers to be created in Photoshop and then brought into InDesign. So hopefully this kind of helped get you an idea of sort of where I want you to be at this point, and just, you know, kind of how to get started. So I could even, you know, if I want this to be my name, I can do by Amy Copeland. And this could be bigger just because I'm going to make it smaller. So let's make this bold, and then I'm going to make this a lot smaller just because it doesn't need to be huge. And then that way it's in my, I'm going to make this left justified. And then it's sort of down here within, actually I want to bring it up to my margin. So obviously this box doesn't really fit within that grid. The covers don't really matter as much. I think that grid will help you with the back cover, but you want to make sure when we get into the actual recipe designs themselves that that is where you're going to want, you know, to really kind of stick to your grid. So hopefully that was a little bit helpful with just the layer mask, the blending modes. You could use a layer mask if you wanted to. Let's just do this one more time. So say you just wanted that turkey. So if I go to this recipe book cover image, so if I just want to go to this turkey, and this you probably want to put in on your recipe book cover. So I'm going to just hide these other files. So say you decide that you want this turkey to actually be the layer mask, and the layer mask should be within your file. Oops, I always hit Shift and you don't have to in Photoshop. That's one of those things I just cannot ever remember. Okay, so say I just want this turkey. I'm just going to do a quick outline. You'll want to spend more time on this, but remember you can do an outline with the pen tool. So, and you should zoom in, but I'm just going to do a quick down and dirty outline of this turkey. It's really bad. I'm going to skip the rosemary because I don't have time, but you should, make this a nice outline. And then I'm going to get the plate. Again, this is something that the pen tool is good for because, this would be a little bit difficult probably with the magnification tool. And you always want to pull out these handles because what you're going to want to do is then kind of go back and clean up that selection. So obviously I'm not going to do that right now because this is just for presentation purposes. So I've got my outliner on my turkey. And then if I go to my paths tool and I go to this little marching ants thing, that'll select that path. I can go back to my layers and I can hit the layer mask, and then that could be, that could be your image as well. So this is what indicates to me that you have done a layer mask. So hopefully this helps. I just kind of wanted to give a little intro of how I would start this project. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, and I look forward to seeing what you create for your recipe book covers.